Good evening. How many people know that there are two James City County supervisory districts in Fort City County, in Fort Carolina? That might explain why we have two supervisors. So, yes, I'd like to welcome Michael Hipple and Jim Icenhour for spending a couple hours with us this evening to talk about. I'll try this again. I'd like to thank them for coming this evening. Just a couple of points about each one of them. Michael, who is in the gray. Okay, he's the Powhatan supervisor. His term is through 2025, December 31st. He's also the chair of the James City Supervisors, so if you really want to address something to them, you might send it to him. He's a builder in James City County with nearly 30 years of experience. Is that about right? 35 years of experience. As a carpenter, he's maybe a bit of a man after my own heart, but we don't have to talk about that. So we're happy that you're here. Thank you, Michael. Jim Icenhour actually lives, Michael lives in Toronto. Jim Icenhour actually lives here in Ford's Colony, and I think I found out today he didn't live that far from me. Okay. He is the supervisor for the Jamestown district. His term also comes out in 2025. He's a retired pilot, not only for F-4 Phantoms and F-111s, which I always thought were kind of cool, but also for both Delta and Pan Am Airlines. Both have been long-term supervisors. For us, something we usually don't think about is that our local government probably has the biggest impact on our lives. If you think about it, it's that trash, recycling, schools, property taxes, congestion, the local rec center. How many people like the rec center? I do. Much more. So when you think about things that are happening in our lives, that the government really can have an impact. Our local government can. These are two guys to talk to about that. So with that, the way I'd like to kick this off is by asking both of them to make a short statement if they want, and then answer this question, and then we can take questions and just let it go where it's going to go. Okay. The question is what do they think is the two biggest issues that face James City County? Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jim. Whoever wants to start.
Go ahead. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate y'all having me in your beautiful neighborhood. I remember Forest County used to be no plantation. And we're very unique in James City County to have such a nice neighborhood. And the people that live in Forest County, is amazing the amount of knowledge that's in this neighborhood, the amount of volunteers we have in this neighborhood, and the amount of caring people that help us in James City County in this neighborhood. So we're very fortunate with that. And you get a lot of people that say, when you get a new neighborhood, oh, there's more people moving in. I said, yeah, there could be more friends moving in as well. So you've got to look at it in both ways. I'm married. I have 7 children, and that keeps me busy. I consider myself with 3 pots. I've got my family pot over here, and I got my business pot, and then my county pot. I got to make sure all of them stay somewhat equal, and especially the family pot doesn't get too empty, because if that happens, the other 2 don't exist. So, but I have a lovely family, and in fact, one of my sons just got married. And I know we'll get married next year, and so things. I got one that graduated this year, so I've got a good array of 2 girls, and 5 boys in the group. And my wife's I'm very fortunate to have her working beside me and I'm taking care of all the things that I miss or can't get to for different events we have in the county and what we're doing in James City County, and very supportive of my run. At first, you questioned it as well and said, "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, you know, while I'm on this position, if I can move the ball a little bit further for the community, then I've done everything I think I can do." And I get to a point when I go, "You know what? I can't take it any further. It's time for someone else to take over and move it a little further." And so I enjoy these events and coming to these events and getting to know everybody and getting asked the hard questions and all that. And I enjoy those because if I can't figure it out, Jim can't figure it out, then we'll go back and find out from staff why it's this or what we're doing there. We do have a supervisor from years ago, Perry DePue, sitting in the back there. I'd like to recognize him. He did a great job. Perry did a wonderful job leading us years ago and set up some of the things that we still work with today in the community. And so he did an excellent job while he was in there, and we hope had the same attitude from the people that Perry has of what a good job he did in leading the community. And it's from people like you that we learn how to lead the community. Okay, you become a supervisor and everybody thinks you know everything. Well, you don't. And I'll be honest with you. But we count on the citizens to give us the things that we need to learn and know and use to make our community better, because it's our community. It's not our community, it's our community. Two things that I think are very important in James City County, and that's easy because there's a lot of them. One that I deal with every day and go down to Chesapeake, I'm on HR TAG, PDC, TPO, and Harumfa. And we all have different committees that we're on in our position at the county. And what they deal with is military and transportation, mainly transportation and planning. And so I think transportation is a big thing for James City County, making sure that as our community grows, which it will grow, we slow down a little bit, which is not a bad thing, because we're controlling and monitoring the growth and trying to put it in the areas that it needs to go in and holding the rural areas that, you know, we want to protect and keep rules so you can ride in the neighborhood and enjoy the scenic area that what brought you here to James City County. So keeping it open and all that with transportation, that's very important. Working regionally with transportation. Another item is our schools. We want to have the best schools possible. We had a lot of stuff going on this year. Is Virginia pay X amount for the schools? How much do we pay? We cover a big portion of our schools, more than most localities. And we make sure that we do. We pay above and beyond what we need to pay to keep our children where they need to be. And we think that's important. Of course, the teachers, and one of my daughters is a teacher, so I know a little bit, and you have a teacher all the time. And his teacher was teaching one of my children this past year. So we both know with teachers, and so sometimes they come up to us and tell us, you're not doing this, you're not supporting this, you're not doing, and they gotta blame somebody. So the board's the easiest one to come up and say, we need more. Everybody needs more. Our police, our fire, and everything else. So we try to do everything we can, and we support our teachers, gave them another 7% raise, and it was a 2-year budget. So normally we wouldn't have changed that in the middle of a 2-year budget. We'd have waited till next year. But we saw a need and saw a desire and saw that, well, we may not get what we need out of the state. We'll keep pushing the state. And I tell the teachers to keep pushing on your side to get what we put in statewide and federal-wide in order to support our schools. So those are two of the main areas that I think we need to work on. And but there's a lot more, and I could talk to you 4 or 5 hours of the meetings at once. But and Jim could tell you, because at times in the meetings they're like, please stop.
He gets paid by the word.
Yes. So I'll turn it over to Jim.
And I do want to thank Perry for being here. And those of you who may or may not know that it used to be called the connector, the Long Hill Ironbound connector, got named for Perry, DePue Boulevard. We lobbied very hard for Rue DePue, but you know. I do want to mention that, I've got two children. One is a retired Air Force, and she's overseas working for NATO at Brussels, and the other one is here in Toronto at middle school. And so I hear about schools firsthand, and she doesn't pull her punches with Dad either. So the two things that I would say are schools and development, and then I've got lots of other things, but I'll leave for questions that will, maybe some of the questions you have, I'll have answers for you. The challenge for schools started out with the budget this year, and we've got what they call a skinny budget. It basically funds the government, but there's $1 billion of unallocated revenue that the legislators are still fighting over. And the question is, how much of it do they want to give back to tax cuts versus how much do we want to put into things that need some money, like education? And I'm a firm believer in the idea that surplus isn't a surplus until you pay those bills. And we are way behind in paying the bills on schools. If you go back to what we were putting into schools from the state budget in 2008, when they had to take a real serious cut education, and we've slowly built back up. But if you take that 2008 figure and adjust it for inflation, we still haven't caught up. And if you take a look at where we were, my daughter used to teach on Newport News. She came to James City County about 7, 8, 9 years ago, something like that. And it was a step up because we were the highest paid in the area. And it was really a nice raise for her. Today, if she went back to Newport News, she could get about a $5,000 a year pay raise. We're at the bottom. When you look at the state, we are below the national average. I think somewhere around $5,000 or $6,000 below the national average for teacher salaries. So one of the things that we have to do, and I put this firmly in the General Assembly's report, is we've got to put some of that money into education. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face right now. It's all being held up. And as Michael said, we had to make the decision to dig deep, come up with some extra money to make sure that the teachers got at least a decent pay raise this year. I'll be quite honest with you, I think it barely covers inflation, and a little bit of the growth. But and the other problem we have sometimes is the increase in medical for them eats up whatever we give them a pay raise. So, there are many years that teachers have really lost ground every year. So that, to me, is number one. As a subset of that, one of the challenges we're going to face is, as you probably have seen in the paper recently, the city of Williamsburg has decided it wants to take a look at whether we're going to continue with the joint school district. I sent a memo to my fellow board members this afternoon looking at exactly what might transpire if that does occur. We don't know that it'll occur, but if it does occur, it will probably be the summer of 2025 at the earliest before that split would be formalized. And we have an obligation to you as the taxpayers and our citizens to make sure that we are prepared for any eventuality, because if they decide they want to leave, we can't stop them. It's just a matter of how we go through the process. And it's fairly complicated because there are 3 schools in the city and the rest of them are in the county. Well, we get the county schools, they get the city schools, but it's not quite that simple because there is a equity stake in each one of these. They have an equity stake here, and we have an equity stake there, and we got to go through and unravel that plate of spaghetti and figure out who owes who what. And at the end of it, there'll be a bill that will have to be paid from one side to the other, whatever. We don't know what that is yet. We're looking at that. So those are some of the challenges I think that really face us. The other thing that is challenging, it hasn't been for a while, but it's going to come back with a vengeance, is been development. And I take a look at residential development with a fairly simple approach. That is, what will that development cost you, the taxpayer? Because most of the time, you get these developments, they're not is fiscally positive. They, especially if they generate a lot of school kids, they cost more in services than they generate in taxes. When that happens, we have only two other places to go. We can either try to pick up some of that money from better business taxes. The other place is we have to come back to you with your property taxes. And bulk of our revenues are from property taxes. So that's why we are very interested in finding out, anytime a developer comes to me, the question I ask him is, what's in it for the taxpayer? How is this going to affect the taxpayer? Because I don't think that those who are here should constantly be picking up the tab for bringing a whole lot of new folks in. I've got a little pretty rigorous approach to some of this. Why do I say this? Well, we have a couple of things that are coming down the pipe. Last month, on the 22nd of May, a developer filed the application for part of Eastern State that is adjacent to Newtown. Their proposal is for 211 residential units. It's not a whole lot. A lot of single family and some apartments. The interesting thing about the single family when I looked at them is that the price point on most of those houses is $1 million. So I don't know how that's going to work, but that's what we're looking at. And there's about 40,000 square feet of commercial on that. That's the small part. The big part that's up behind Eastern State, we've been expecting an application at any time. I checked with the county today, and it looks like that may not be until later this year. I think they've run their plans by us one time, and I think we've given them some feedback, and I think they're going back and taking another look at it. Because I can tell you what they originally planned on that was about 1,100 units behind Eastern State. There was part left off for a medical campus, and there's a part that's designated for county use site, and then there was a little small commercial part. Again, without a significant balance in there, the question I have is, what's the fiscal analysis? What's it going to cost the taxpayer? That one, we're waiting to see what happens. There are several others around the county that are proposed. We're just waiting for the shoe to drop. So I think that is probably one of the biggest, the second biggest threat I think I see that we have to look out for and be prepared for. I had one other question I wanted to ask before we open it up for questions. How many folks here have been here less than 5 years? Okay. How many of you came from outside Virginia? All right. Let me give you my 30-second. Okay. Let me give you a little clip notes. Virginia is unique. We are what's called a Dillon rule state. And I refer to that as the mother may I rule. In any other state that has home rule, local government essentially has whatever powers are inherent in trying to run local government unless the state government specifically prohibits it. In a Dillon rule state, that's just the reverse. We have no authority as local government to do anything in Virginia that isn't specifically authorized by the General Assembly. If they haven't said yes, we can't do it. So that gives you a little bit of a different view on how local government, because we get called about why don't you do this or why don't you do that. The second thing is that in Virginia, with the exception of some Northern Virginia counties do not own roads. Cities do. The city of Williamsburg is responsible for its own roads. They have authority over their roads. We don't. Every road in James City County is the purview of VDOT. So when you call and ask us, why don't you fix the pothole here? Why don't you repave that? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do a traffic study? Well, all this kind of stuff. We can then take that and we pick up the phone and we call our friend Rossi Carroll over there and we try to talk to him. He doesn't have to listen to us. He typically does, but sometimes we run into the bureaucracy of VDOT at higher levels. And people just need to understand that that's one of the limitations that we have. So I want to make sure you knew that there are a whole bunch of other things about Virginia, but that's the basic cliff notes on it.
Exactly. When Jim talked about the schools and how we're behind, he was indicating state. Because the county pays, we're at 104% more than we need to pay for schools because we care about our schools. So we're putting in a lot more. And as a state lessens the amount, we have to fill in that gap. So, and of course, we fill it in, talking about we, and I include we, it's all of us by the taxes we pay. So we're all having to put into that to cover what the state is not covering. If they say you're not getting this, you're not getting that, you know, we can't have our teachers leave. We can't have our schools go down. We've got to keep our schools up in quality. So then it's up to us to go, okay, where are we going to find $3, $4, $5 million? And when your budget, you know, you take 52% basically of your entire budget goes to the school right off the bat. That's gone. So then by the time you take fire, police, EMS, we have about 25% left of our budget. I think it's 27.8% left of our budget that we then can spend on the rest of the county, the parks and the recs and all that. That's all we have left to keep our staff and everything going. So we don't have a whole lot at the end of the day to work with for the rest of the county. Now, the school's worth it. Yeah, they're worth it, and our children are worth it. And it's very important to make sure we take care of those. But it's amazing when you start cutting it down, how much little we use and we spend on running the rest of the county. And of course, we need fire, police, EMS. We need more. We got 10 new cadets that are in the process right now, and all 10 are doing very well. Look like they're all going to make it through the academy. So that's 10 more men and women that we'll be able to put on our fire department line and keep that up. And we're fully staffed now, but this will give us days off, vacation days, holidays, sick leave to make sure we can fill in everything and make sure that our staff is fully filled out for, you know, any needs that we have. I'll open up for questions and.
You guys have the mics, or do you want to have them just yell out questions or whatever?
You want me to go out and ask you a question?
You might not like my answer.
That's all right. I'll give them the good ones y'all will know about.
Thank you very much for being here and for answering our questions. We appreciate that. You mentioned the fire department and how you have 10 candidates that are hopefully going to make it into the fire department. My concern is our police department. There's been a lot in the news, especially since the new year. I believe we have a new chief of police. And I also believe we're understaffed in our police department. And I'd just like to know what we as a county are doing about it and what we can do about it.
We've been working very hard on the police department. I've been working on that for the last year and a half, 2 years. I'm a volunteer firefighter, been in the volunteers since '84. So I know a lot of the officers because we work so close together and dispatch as well. And so I've been kind of working with the county administrator and all that on a lot of the things that are going on with our police department. We have a twofold thing happening. One is all the media response and all, defund the police. We don't need police. We're going to get rid of police. There's no need. They're all bad people, and they're not. We've got a great department. We've got a bunch of good, dedicated staff. But what we're finding is people were getting to the point where they were like, you know what? I can go get this job over here, and I don't have to worry about it. If I arrest somebody or have to wrestle with them and hurt them, I could be in jail. And I'm protecting this person over here. And it's a shame how this country has let all officers down. My grandfather was a decorated detective in Norfolk, and I've got a nephew who's a detective in Hampton. And so the police department is pretty tight with our family as far as, you know, members of our family, and that's one thing. But it's amazing that we had two things going. We had the media and everything that was going on there and the stress of the job. COVID hit, that added to everything, the stress of the job. Well, our police, fire, and EMS were answering the calls, going to things, and having just as many fears as the rest of us going, is this real? Is it not real? Can I die? Am I going to get sick? Can it cure me? I've got to go take care of the people that are the worst off and make sure that I don't get sick. And what if I do get sick, carry home to my family? So that stress added on to that as well. Then we had a few retirees, and I know the good guys and gals, and they came to me and they were disgruntled with some of the leadership in the department. And they thought, well, you ought to do this and you shouldn't do that, and we didn't do it. And I said, guys and gals, let me tell you. I was in here, and one of the guys retired. I said, I've been in here since '84 with fire, working with police and all that. And he said, well, I was 5 years old then, and now he's retired. I'm like, well, darn, that doesn't sound right. I'm still a very young man. But, you know, the problem, they were hearing stuff from other officers that were so frustrated and so irritated with everything that was going on. And I can't blame them. And we found pay was a little bit, we were under on our pay, so we upped that. We upped it just again. We upped it for all employees again. And then they were finding out that also with that, they were going online. And while we lost the one police chief, he decided to retire. Our other police chief we hired as assistant county administrator. And the second police chief was in there not long, and he decided to retire. Now we have a new police chief, and we decided to go, we're gonna put it out for anybody who's interested in being a police chief in James City County. Got a great candidate. He's ready to get started. I haven't met him yet. None of the board members have met him. We'll either meet him end of this week, first of next week. The county administrator's trying to set that up while he comes down with his family. I've already heard from some of the officers that he's checked in and talked with and all that, and one of them stopped me before a meeting and said, hey, I'll tell you what, he's a good guy. He's going to do well for us. I think it was a mixture of what's going on in the media. Am I really loved by the community? Am I getting what I need to pay-wise? I'm hearing the retired guys saying a few things, so I'm wondering, is that really going on? There was a little issue as far as race in the department, and we have a mix in the department, and so there was a little thought about that. And so with all that going on at one time, with all the pressures they're under, that was adding into our problems. And I could get another job over here paying just as much, if not more, and not get shot, and not having people spit on me and yell at me and cuss me out and everything else, when I'm just doing the job I'm asked to do and protect the rest of the people that are out there. So I think all that going on and the leadership change and everything else, it just opened it up for issues. So the county administrator, we brought a team in from outside James City County to meet with every officer in the county. And look, what are your issues? What do you see? What are the problems? What do you think would help? How do you think this will work? What can we put in place? And so we compiled all that information and then shared that with the officers as well and said, out of this survey, and no one knew who anyone was. Out of the survey, we found that these are the areas we can change and do better. These are the areas we're going to have to work on and put in a plan in order to implement those throughout the year. And so the chief that took over done a great job, assistant chief. He's done a wonderful job, and the staff loves him. And he held it in place and started putting some of the things in place. And we started feeling and seeing real positive attitudes from our officers. I mean, they weren't bad. The officers were just like, disgruntled to a certain extent, which, sometimes it happens. So we were able to take care of that, put in a new police chief now. The department is already, even though he hadn't started working yet, they've already met him and talked to him all that, like him. And with that, we're looking at that as far as bringing a new leadership into the police department, starting a new way of looking at things. Because sometimes you get doing things, and that's what we did. We did it 20 years ago, and it's always worked. Well, the community changes. And it's not that it's not a good program. It's not that it's not working well. It's just not working as well as it should. And so a new set of eyes we thought needed to be brought in order to see, hey, what can I change? How can I change things? And we didn't do the search ourselves. You'll read some things, well, they did a search, picked who they wanted and all that. We had the Police Chiefs Association do the search for us. You vet everybody. You tell us, not James City County, you tell us, because our county administrator, we hire the county administrator, and he's tasked to hire and fire everyone underneath him and take care of us. We tasked him with that job. But as we talked, and he said, you know what, let's go out of town, let's get the police chiefs to come in, do this search, vet everybody to the last two. They vetted to the last two, and then the county administrator with their recommendations and all made his decision on that. So that way we could stay out. Nobody could say, well, you picked your buddy. You always knew Sam was going to be in there and y'all picked Sam. You know, and people think that. I can't blame them. I think if I was in that position and I thought Jim should do it or Sarah ought to do it, you pick Sam, I might be mad that Sam got picked. And why does Sam get picked? Sarah does a great job. I think she'd make a great police chief. So that's why we took it out of town, took it away from everything, and tried to get up so that nobody could say somehow somebody picked a buddy. It was all brought to us at the end and said, these are your best candidates.
Michael covered it quite thoroughly, quite well. I would say that there are just a couple of things. COVID hit us hard, and we had two things occurred. We had a lot of people who made life decisions after COVID about leaving, moving on to something else. We had a lot of people who were very senior and decided to retire. So like any of the other corporations that do business in James City County up here on the peninsula, we faced an issue with people. Getting enough people. It wasn't just the police or the fire, although that was critical in both areas. We were short in both police and fire. But it was across the board. Our general services and our parks and rec really took a hit. So we had to make some conscious decisions about how we were going to compete with other jurisdictions. And that meant that we had to put some money on the table. We had to put pay raises out there. We started with the police, we started with the fire, and we did some pay adjustments to try to make it competitive, because it's stupid for us to train these people and lose them to a neighboring jurisdiction for as little as $3,000 or $4,000 a year. So we had to take care of our people, and that meant we had to put some money in the game. I'll tell you that I think that the police department is, how many people realize how small our police department is? We have 105 sworn officers. You think about a county of almost 80,000 people. We have 105 sworn officers, and we're now doing, instead of 8-hour shifts, they're doing 2 12-hour shifts. 2 12-hour shifts, so they've changed the shift work. But that, by the time you account for people in training, for people going on vacation, people who are out sick, all that kind of stuff, we're pretty thin. We're pretty thin, and yet our record of maintaining, the law in our county has been very, very good. So I've been very proud of it. I will tell you that I was chair during the COVID time period, and every year the chairman gets to make an award, and usually it's one to an individual and one to an organization. And my chairman's award was to the police department because of the superb job that I felt that they did during the COVID crisis. And I got to tell you, being a police officer at that time for me was really challenging, really challenging. So I felt that that they really deserved that. That's pretty much all I have.
Hi, you mentioned development before, and you were talking about residential. I'm thinking about commercial development. There are a number of malls around here. I've been here 15 years. When I first came, there were 2 malls that were in deplorable shape. And now I think probably I can name about 5 or 6 that are losing businesses and are, not doing what they should do. How did all that happen? There's nobody that looked over that whole thing and said, we got too many and we can't support them and they aren't going anywhere? I recognize some are in different counties, but I'm still laying it all in.
Recognizing one of the challenges we have is when something new comes along and they have to have a land use designation or a rezoning or whatever, we get to weigh in on that. But once that's done and the place is built, we really don't have a whole lot of leverage. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Existing places that have, in the county, that have been run down and that have recovered, okay? The Colony Square Mall down on Jamestown Road, all right, that one was a dying little small shopping center. What saved it was the restore. If you go down there, every store in that little mall is completely refilled. The one over on the Jamestown, on John Tyler at 199, the shopping center in there. That was one that was basically terribly mismanaged, and it was probably 60–70% empty. It has made a phenomenal recovery. It's not totally filled, but it's been a phenomenal recovery. So some of these have made good recoveries. Then there are other places, and these are the ones that just drive me crazy, like Newtown. You go walk down the main street at Newtown, and half the buildings are empty. And so I go to the people and I say, who are landlords over there, I say, well, why don't you drop your rents a little bit and get some tenants to come in here and fill this out? It'd be really good for the community and all that. It's owned by financial interests from well outside the state. And I hate to say it, but I think they don't care, because as long as they can get a tax write-off, that's all they're interested in. That thing could sit empty. I'm so frustrated at our inability to influence that. I actually went over and sat down with Bobby Singley from Singley. He does one of the big commercial real estate developers. And I said, Bobby, what can we do? What can we do to try to help fix some of these things? And the answer was not a whole lot. Again, this is the Commonwealth of Virginia. We don't have a whole lot of leverage in those aspects at the local level. We can complain, usually the state government, and it sometimes does or doesn't help. Let me tell you a couple of things that are concerning to me. You have coming up, like I said, in Eastern State, there's going to be some new commercial aspect of that that we proposed. So the question becomes, how big is it, and is it necessary? Because I'll tell you, if it's just pure residential with no commercial, then it becomes really difficult from a tax standpoint. You have to have some sort of commercial revenues generated by it to help make it balance out. We have a couple of other places that have already been approved, and I don't know whether people are aware of this one, but up at exit 227, two sides of exit 227 up by Stonehouse. When you drive up to Richmond, Route 30 comes across. On the north side, there's a place that was just rezoned called the Village Center, and it is approved for 51,000 square feet. I'm sorry, 510,000 square feet. Commercial, office, retail, restaurant, and hotel. That's right across the entrance to Stonehouse, just on the north side of the interstate. On the south side, we've got an enterprise center, and this is one that was just approved shortly afterwards. A little over 3.2 million square feet of warehouse, industrial, and office, with 75,000 square feet of commercial up on the front, which could be retail or whatever. So those are two areas that the board has approved, that we don't know whether it'll be built in 2 years, 20 years, 50 years, but it's approved and it can be built. And most of the time, the decision to go ahead is based upon the economics of the environment for these developers. And I think you're going to see at least the enterprise center, the industrial part of it, go fairly quickly. At least I hope it goes fairly quickly, because that will tend to generate more revenue for the county with minimal impact on storefronts. This is more like an industrial park type of area. But yeah, we got a lot of empty space out there, and a lot that can be built.
So the key of what you said is, if you get new residential, you encourage new commercial to go along with it because there's a tax base there, even though
Well, it's all,
Start now and say it's gonna be more empty.
it's also to try, for example, if you were going to be a resident of the northern end of the county, one of the reasons people like that up there is when they get in the car, they got to drive about a half an hour to get to most of the grocery stores and stuff like that. They won't want up there near them. So, I can understand why people would want something close to them. The question becomes is how much is too much, especially when you start getting empty storefronts. And those are the kinds of decisions that when something comes before me as a member of the board and asking for my approval for some development like this, the first question I'm going to look at is, all right, why do we need to pour more gas in the fire? We've got empty space already. Because let me tell you, when you've got empty space, repurposing empty commercial space is a challenge. It's a real challenge.
I have another question here.
I first of all just want to thank you for serving in what are truly thankless jobs. You're at the level where democracy actually has to work.
We only do it for the money.
Well, double your salaries. I appreciate what I've heard about caution about development. I have lived in 3 areas where developers came in. They made a lot of promises about residential development. There were going to be $1 million homes. People were promised that, okay, those homeowners and the developer would pay the costs. No, that's not what happened. Our property taxes rose 40% because they didn't. And what Mr. Icenhour has said is exactly right. There was no calculation done about the cost of additional children in the schools, about police, about road construction, about all sorts of other things. So thank you for being cautious, because in every case that I know of, the burden of picking up the cost goes on the existing homeowners, not new homeowners.
You hit that right on the nail, because that's the trouble we fight all the time is, of course, when they come in with the plans and all that, they're gorgeous. We're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And what they do is it's death by 1,000 cuts. It starts out looking like this, and then they come back and say, we want to change this item. There's the first cut. Now we want to change this item. There's the second. Then we want to do this. There's the third. Now we want to put water and sewer in. There's the fourth. Now we're gonna, and it's funny because we're gonna cluster in one area. And that's gonna save all this green space. Well, if you've got a quarter or a half acre and you're clustering in one area, and you've got 200 acres over here, and basically you've disrupted all of it. And I tell them all the time, well, a deer doesn't know if you have a quarter acre lot or a 3 acre lot. If you got some good azaleas, I'm coming to eat. And so I said, but the cluster area, the developer can put a lot more density in there, less infrastructure and everything else. And then he can take a tax write-off on the other, and then nobody pays any fees on that. There's no taxes on that. Where if it's a 3 acre lot, you're paying tax on it. If it's a quarter acre and this is all in wood over here, well, we're not getting anything. So we've got to come back and look at y'all going, hey, that area over there, we want y'all to go ahead and cover too. So when we make our decisions, we look at both of that. And a question about development, the more we end up with commercial, the less we have on taxes on our citizens, because we get a lot more out of the commercial side than we can the residential side. So it saves our residents. So we got to try to balance those and find the good paying commercial jobs. And our EDA is doing very well. The Outlet Mall used to be, I remember when that was a cornfield right there at Centerville and 60. Beautiful cornfield. And they cut that whole thing down, put that mall in it. This is the biggest thing's going to happen in the area and all this. Lightfoot then was called the Golden Mile. I lived just down the road from it, watched it all happen and all that. And then the mall slowly deteriorated And it was one of the biggest selling malls for its size on the East Coast, believe it or not, that little teeny mall. And then when it started going down, we started looking, talking to different developers and this and that. How can we repurpose this property? Maybe not the buildings. And we were able to work with them and repurpose that and get the Harris Teeter and get that blight out of the area. So we try to find ways that we can go, who would come in and rework this piece? I get a lot of people that ask us, say, well, you got a building over here. Why can't you put them in over here? And I said, well, it's kind of like houses. You know, somebody sells a house or they passed away and there's a house available here and the person over here wants to move. And they want to move to a single story, but this is a 2-story. Well, stick them in there. They're like, well, you lost your mind. I'm not going in that house. And it's the same commercial. If you think of it that way, they're like, that doesn't fit who I am and the build I am. I need to build, you know, like Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A going to McDonald's is not gonna, they're gonna have to redo the whole thing. Now, the space may be fine. So our EDA is constantly, anybody comes, they've got a list of all the places that are available. And anybody comes in town and says, I want to do this, you have anything? They present them with all the possibilities. And so does our real estate market as well. So we're trying on both sides of it to eat up those places and revitalize those areas the best we can. But, you know, when somebody says, we're going to come in and we're going to do this and develop X amount, and it's a good plan, and, you know, we think it's going to work, we've also got to look at, well, what if that developer goes under and somebody else buys it, now wants to change it, and what do we do then? So it's a lot of moving parts, and it sounds real easy, and I know we make it look easy. But it can be very, but that's a good question. I'm always trying to figure out what we do with those projects.
I'd like to tell you that one of the things that I want to make a differentiation here, we have a lot of empty storefronts. Virtually all of them are retail. Okay? If you take a look at where we really want to put our emphasis, is industrial park up there. That's the kind of business that we bring to James City County that creates jobs. It gives good paying jobs, and it brings us a tax base without causing a drain on our resources, because what we have to provide for them is fairly nominal, as opposed to some of the others. Navient, I was going to mention that. We just did one, the old lumber liquidators, used to be done, was it John Deere, and then they went out, and lumber liquidators came in and made their headquarters there, and they pulled out. So we lost 2 major commercial tenants out of that. Well, Navient came in. I'd never heard of them before, but they're the largest producer of tankless hot water heaters. You know, and they came here to us and said, hey, we want to make James City County, they're out of South Korea. They want to make James City County their headquarters for the Eastern United States. And they're going to be the manufacturing and distribution for the whole East Coast, all the way to Canada down to into the Caribbean. And we looked at that, and we actually gave them some incentives based upon performance that they are required to meet. They're making tremendous investments in that facility and that infrastructure. And it's the jobs that most of them were $50,000, $60,000 a year jobs at even starting out.
We bought the land behind.
And we bought land behind to give them room to expand. So these are the kinds of things that we're looking for. I think that are going to be crucial, because that's how we can diversify the tax base to keep from having these property taxes. That's the frustrating part.
It's on the side.
I have that on.
That's fine.
So, we're relatively new here. We came from Fairfax County, where water was not all that expensive in sewer. And we're astounded at the cost of water here. Is it a question of the availability of the water or the infrastructure needed? And of course, more development is going to mean more cost to the water. I just wondered where's the problem? Thank you.
I tell people that if people don't realize this, is that James City County is one of the largest areas that is solely dependent on groundwater. We have no surface water, zero. Let's say, well, there's a reservoir up here in the northern end of the county. Yeah, guess who it don't belongs to? Newport News. Because when we were 6,000 people, Newport News came up here and said, we want to build a reservoir. County let them do it. Trying to get a reservoir these days is an uphill fight. You're not going to get it done. King William Reservoir was the last round of it, and you are not going to get a new surface reservoir built. That's just the realities that we're facing. So we are sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. And I'll tell you that two things have occurred in my time period here. The per capita water use has gone down dramatically. I attribute that to two things. Number one is that there are a lot of really water smart appliances going into homes, either new homes being built or older homes being retrofitted, so that helps contribute to the lower per capita consumption. But the other thing has been, I think, a dramatic shift in the way people take perfectly good water that we purify and make available for drinking, and they pour it out on the ground, on their grass. Irrigation. Irrigation has been a real big problem in the past. It's gotten to be less and less of a problem because if you're like me, I looked at that 3-tier system and I said, boy, that 3rd tier gets really expensive. So I adjust my irrigation down to where I don't go into that 3rd tier. And what I've done over the last 10 years is the only grass I have is what borders the street around the edge of my lot. The rest of it's all mulch and bushes because I don't have to put water on it like that as much. So I think that's a factor that has contributed to it. Now, water is the cheapest water you can have is what we actually have right now, which is the water out of the ground. That's regulated by the state. The state has basically told us that we may face a curtailment of our water withdrawal permit, which means that if that's the case, we have two other ways to do it. We either buy surplus water from somebody else who has it, or we can go to another desalination plant. I don't know whether you're aware right now, but we do a large part of our water withdrawal comes from the lower Potomac aquifer, which is brackish. And we have a plant down in Five Forks. We run it through a reverse osmosis process, and it gets mixed in with the regular water we draw from the other aquifers that are not so high in salt content. So essentially, we've already done some of this, but we could now do, if we needed to, out of the Chickahominy River or where the salinity is not uniform, like it is down in the lower aquifer. There's the technology now to be able to take that water and run it through a process to produce water, for drinkable water. It's very, very expensive. So I tell people, we're not going to run out of water. We're going to have the ability to get water to meet our needs for the future. The question is what we're going to pay for it. And our goal is to try to get you that water at the lowest possible cost. Now, let me go back and tell you, talking about, I don't know what it was in Northern Virginia, but I can tell you here in the main area here of Hampton Roads, we are, I believe, the cheapest.
With the combination, we're the 3rd lowest.
Okay.
Out of the whole region.
Out of the whole region, 3rd lowest. And I have people say, well, our rates keep going up, our rates keep going up. You know, take a look at one of the things that has caused that has been, years ago, there was a EPA consent decree, not only with us, but with all the jurisdictions in the local area here about sewer discharges. They required us to go back and do all sorts of infrastructure updates to our sewer system so that we didn't have these sewer spills that were contaminating the water use. That meant that we had to build, because our service authority that provides water and sewer is a separate entity. We happen to sit as board members on that. It's a separate entity, and it does not get any funding from taxes. It is totally, all of its funding comes from user fees, what you pay for water and sewer. And so in order to provide for that infrastructure, we've had to raise our rates over the years to build the reserve, the capital reserve, to be able to go in and do the repairs to all of these sewer lines, especially. some of which are
And in the 40s.
put in like that back in the 40s. So we are in the process of doing. We just did a major renovation to I think all the water lines over in White Oaks, which is just north of Route 5 at 199, the neighborhood in there. They had very small lines that were not capable of providing fire suppression support, and that the system was going way back into the 60s and 70s, I believe. And we were having a lot of line breaks and a lot of problems. So we went in and did like I think about a $7 or $8 million complete revamp of all the water supply lines in that community. Constantly doing this kind of stuff. Where does that money come from? It comes from the rates you pay. And the fact that we have been able to keep it to where we're third lowest in the region has been, I think, phenomenal. Yeah, it's a challenge. And I'm going to throw one more thing out there so that people know that it's coming. Service Authority has made a couple of changes coming up as of February next year. Yeah. Right now, you get your bill for water. We provide water and we provide sewer service to you. And then we pipe the sewer to Hampton Road Sanitation District, and they do the treatment and they charge you. So you get a bill that has three parts to it. One water and one sewer from James City County, and then one for the treatment from Hampton Road Sanitation. We are actually going to start billing ourselves for James City Service Authority for the water and sewer, and you'll get a separate bill from the Hampton Roads Sanitation District for the treatment. That will occur about February. As a part of that, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to go, for those of you who have sub-meters, like me, and you have to, if you want to get the credit, you got to go fill out your sub-meter and do all that kind of stuff. We're going to simplify it for you, real simple. If you use 8,000 gallons a month or less, it's all going to be presumed to be household use. If anything above 8,000 gallons is going to be presumed to be irrigation. So they're going to do away with the sub-meter readings. Now, what that does for the average customer is it really doesn't change your bill that significantly. It really doesn't, because it's still going to be one of those where typically I'm well below 8,000 gallons, so I'm going to pay an incremental difference for what I would normally be using for irrigation under 8,000 gallons. I'm going to pay that a little bit of extra for the sewer thing. I think we figured out that the bill on that was about $4 or $5. It was fairly nominal. They went back through and looked at the whole thing. So just so you know that that's coming, that's one of the things that the Service Authority is looking at. And so those are questions. You want to jump in on?
And years ago with our water and sewer, we never did any rate studies. So we got a group to come in and said, look, we need to do a rate study. We need to analyze the whole division and go, okay, because we were having breaks, and I said, well, where are we getting the money for repairs and all? What are we putting in a repair budget? Where we have certain funds that we just got dedicated for that type work, just thinking business. And so we started changing things, got a company come in and do a rate study with us, and they found out, look, you're behind on your rates. If you continue like this, you're going to basically go out of business. You have to adjust because you're not figuring your repairs and everything else. And you're not looking in the future of, okay, these lines are deteriorating at a rate of X. So in 20 years, this section might start failing at a rate that it'd be cheaper to put in a whole new section than keep repairing it and having people down on longer periods of time. And usually it's in the hot weather or the cold weather. It's never a beautiful day, day like today. And the aquifers were going down. We were getting land subsiding where the land was starting to crush because the water wasn't holding it up as like it had before. But the SWIFT program that they started injecting in Newport News and down in Suffolk started bringing that level up. So they're seeing that level come back quicker than they imagined it would. And they say you can drink that water that they're injecting in. It's wastewater that's been treated, and they had a cup out there you could drink out, so I'll skip it all. Thanks, but And they wanted to do it in James City County, and we ran into a little problem with land taking and that sort of thing, and they decided to move down to Newport News, which I was kind of happy with, because the aquifer doesn't move wherever it's injected. It stays within a mile in that area. So I thought, you know what, let's kind of try it down there, and we'll keep our water up here fresh. And, you know, not that I don't want anything to happen, I don't think it will, because there's a lot of scientists working on it that way, but just in case, you know, new programs and new things. You know, so I'd rather, let's test it down there, and we'll stay up here for a little while. But, you know, we found that we're gonna end up probably getting more water as future goes on than what we thought we were gonna get, because now it's not as bad. But if you think about it, we're in a category with West Point. But our water is drinking water. Their water is processing water. So I'm sitting there going, well, how do we get lumped in with them as far as the mill and what they're doing with their water and how much they're drawing? Our water is going to keep our citizens healthy and having drinking water. But that's the way the EPA and everything else is put together with the water regulations and all that. And that's where we have to work out of it. And like I say, it's another thing where they don't have our hands tied totally behind our back, but it's enough to keep us from driving.
We have a question here.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Joe. Good evening, and thank you for being here. With regard to development and affordable housing, I get the Stonehouse area, you want to commercialize that. The 2045 plan, if I read it correctly and understand it, it seems contrary to then supporting that base, that industrial base, that commercial base with affordable housing. Because of the changes you've made or that have been made with regard to zoning and density and setbacks and things like that. And there's a second part to the question. And it seems inconsistent with what Youngkin is pushing in terms of, I think it's called Make Virginia Home. In terms of what he's trying to get local government to do in terms of zoning, density, affordable housing, zoning, all that stuff. So when you look at the big picture, there seem to be forces for and forces against development and commercialization. So I don't know if it's a question, just an observation.
Fine.
Green and black.
Up in Stonehouse, you know, they talked about putting some houses in there in that development and all that. We said, look, you gonna do that? We're not gonna approve it. Because what we're trying to do there was end up with that area there being commercial and having a tax base. And so, but as far as like the other day, we just ended up purchasing land on Moortown Road. It became available. We got it for half of what it was on the market for workforce development houses. And during the process, I said, why don't we take those? Because we have to work within our guidelines and what we say, okay, this area will have lot sizes of X. So you can't just go in there and go, we're gonna put workforce housing in there, but we're gonna make them smaller. So the only way we can do that is the board needs to change those ordinances. And so what I said was, let's look at that land since we bought, 17 some acres there. We think we can put X amount on there. Let's go ahead and, if we're gonna put the workforce development housing, let's go back to like after World War II. When there were so many houses being looked at to be built and put in and all that, they didn't have the lot sizes we had. The neighborhoods were tight. There may be 3 houses, and the garage is on this side, and the next house is the exact same thing, but it's on this side. And then there's a 2-story house, and it changed the neighborhood a little bit, but you had them tight. And I said, with workforce housing, really the people are wanting to get a step up and wanting to have a house, but probably don't have all the whereas to keep a big yard and keep everything going. They're coming home dead tired and taking care of the kids, make sure everything's done. If we eat and we've done this, we've done it, let's go to bed. And they don't have time to take care of the bigger yards. So let's make the yard smaller. And let's look at changing a few things and trying to make it a little bit better. So in every neighborhood, we have a certain amount of workforce housing that we request that the developer puts on the market so that it's a blend. Because we've heard a lot of where, okay, we don't want one area to be nothing but workforce development or low income or whatever you want to call it. We want to kind of blend it in so people are in the neighborhood, their kids are in the neighborhood. You really can't tell it when you drive through there. The neighbors will know, they paid $200 less than I paid on my house, and of course the neighbors always know, but driving through there, you wouldn't really know that house is different than that house. So we're trying different ways to try to pull all that in and make it so that we're keeping your taxes down. We're putting in right development in the right area, up next to the interstate, in and out, easy accessibility, is not in the neighborhood area, and then putting the workforce housing in areas that we can put a little bit more dense pack in there to, get the biggest bang for our buck.
Let me use two terms, talk about them for just a second. There's workforce housing, and then there's the term affordable housing. Anytime you say affordable housing, everybody says ghetto. All right? And that's not what we're trying to meet. We're targeting a lot of these workforce housing. When you look at the average mean income here in the county, you're looking at some of these programs that range from 40 to 80% of the average mean income. You know who that is? Starting police officers, starting firefighters, starting teachers, all right? This is not ghetto. These are the people that we have working in our county, and most of them can't afford to live here. Now, let me get back to the idea of we've always dealt with this idea of affordable housing or workforce housing, and we try to have policies, and we ask a developer, he's going to build a community of 200 houses, we want 15 or 20 to be affordable or whatever, and he agrees and he takes a cut. And he puts those on the market for a lower price. How they can make sure that it's not taken up by somebody who has enough money to buy a bigger house, that's always been does it get to the right person? And even if it gets to the right person, when it's a for sale house, guess what happens? The market dictates the price. It's only affordable for the first person. By the time it's resold, it's just like any other house in the county. And you know what prices are like in the county. So that's been the frustrating part for me, has been the concept of an affordable housing. Now we did Newtown, the county had a program where we had what we call soft second mortgages. Whereas a person bought into that house and got it at the lower rate, the county basically did what we call a soft second mortgage. The county had an interest, so that when the house was sold, if you sold it and you were trying to make a killing on it, you had to pay back that second mortgage. So it was a try to help keep the house affordable in the for sale market. But what you find is we don't have that many people that monitor these programs and stuff. It was a maintenance nightmare. So I've come to the conclusion that there are two things that we need in order to be able to deal with affordable housing, to get somebody to be able to live in the county when they work here. And that is, it's going to have to be higher density. It's going to have to be either townhouses or apartments. And it's got to be rental. And how do you keep the rents there? Well, there's a program that's called low income tax credits. That basically, if it's built with those tax credits, that they are locked in for certain rates, for certain numbers of apartments for like 30 years. Because the financing that comes from the state to the developer is how the developer makes the money. The developer couldn't make money on it if they didn't have that. We have about 8 or 9 of those throughout the county here. And you probably, if you've driven by over here, the one by the rec center, it's a nice little apartment complex. That's built with some of the tax credits. They're all up and down the county. There are about 8 or 10 of them. That's what we have to try to do. Now, one of the things we found is that we're trying to pick up pieces of property where we can either work with Habitat for Humanity or housing partnerships, or the organizations like this, or the houses where people want to come and build their own house. Or we try to do these other apartment complexes where we can accommodate folks so they can live in our communities. That's been a challenge we've faced. And every time we try one of these, it's amazing the pushback we get. It's amazing the pushback we get. And when you consider who it is we're trying to help, it doesn't make any sense.
Thank you. First, I think the conversation about the water and sewer was very helpful, because one of the first things I'm going to do tonight is when I get home, make sure that the controller shut off. I don't need the rain tomorrow to irrigate along for the next foreseeable future. We had over 3 inches when we left the house. The second thing is there an update on what's happening with the library system?
All right, the library, what we're looking to with Williamsburg is we're looking to partner with Williamsburg and look at and they started all the movement on the library. They have funds to get it moving on the site. They're gonna take the police department down and they're gonna redo the library and put a new library there and all that. So, and we agreed that, okay, if we help you on your library, which we all own together, but you know, we consider ours and yours, and we help you on yours in 5 to 7 years, then when we build ours, then what we want to do is we need help from you on that as well, so we can keep that a regional issue. And one of the items that we talked about when the mayor talked to us about possibly splitting with the schools, I was like, man, I said, that's a regional thing. We're doing a regional library. We're looking at a regional rec center. We're doing regional transportation. And now you don't want to do regional schools? I mean, you're getting the bigger benefit from us with the schools. And I said, you know, if you do a survey and we do a survey and our survey tells the citizens that, hey, we're better off not having Williamsburg. I said, I can't get all those worms back in that can, because the citizens are going to say, okay, you see this? This is what I want you to act on. So I said, you may be cutting your own throat here. I said, just want to advise you. But, you know, we said, we're still going to continue with the library as we're going now, and the rec area as well, and look at those. I've had a lot of citizens say, well, if they don't want to be in the school, if we don't want to be in the library, we won't be in here. And I said, well, we got to look at it differently. We got to look at what's best regionally for the citizens. I said, I can't just sit there and go, okay, Williamsburg, you're 9 square miles and we're 191 square miles. You know, and I tell the mayor every now and then, I said, we're thinking about buying you. That burns them. I said, you're only 9 square miles, so just buying you and be done with it. And I said, we even varies most of that. So, you know, and he laughs. He gets at me, he says, I went the other day and I had my Williamsburg stuff on and all that. And he says, I was meeting with the delegates and all that. And they said, Mr. Hipple, what do you need? And Doug's just bald as I am. So he was like, go Ponds. So, you know, he and I play back and forth. But, you know, I was surprised at the school thing. We'll have to work through that. But I think what we're doing regionally with the library and supporting the library and trying to do it as a unit. We've got York County, they're going to put in something. They're not sure yet. They're getting ready to all this next elections for their entire board. We do we have 3 running on this election cycle. And then 2 years from now, Jim and I run. And in that way, there's somebody on the board and there's a major change. If all of us look like raging idiots and you want to get rid of all of us, then at least you have to do it in a 2-year, you know. But with them, you can wipe them all out at one time. And so that makes it tough on staff and what you're doing the next one. So, but, you know, as far as the libraries, we're going to continue moving forward with the library. We're going to continue moving forward with the regional stuff as we sit right now. So, yeah, I think it's important for the citizens.
One of the things about the library that we've been working on as we went through this was the initial pitch to us was we wanted to do a 65 or 70,000 square square foot facility downtown on that current site. And if you get down there to try to park, that's been a challenge. And so but we really pushed them hard to try to cut it down. And we said, we know you need that kind of square footage. Let's break it in 2 chunks. Let's do 35,000 square feet down there. And later on, we'll do 35,000 feet out in the county somewhere. And so I think 35,000 square feet is much more manageable. It will allow for adequate parking down there. I believe what they're planning on doing, if they built a new fire station across the street, they're going to tear down the police station. I don't know where they're going to build a new one, but it's
going to go behind the left of the firehouse.
Okay, back behind the firehouse. So all of that area around the Stryker building is there. I think what they're planning on doing is putting the new library there, operating out of the existing one while that gets built, and then they'll knock down the existing one and do the parking. That's my understanding of how it would work. What it allows us to do is to build into our plans out in the out years, at least about 5 years, I think, a second 35,000 square foot facility. And we are looking for sites in and around the Newtown area, which is more the center of population of the county, so that you don't have to drive all the way from Grove up to Croker Road or whatever. So it would be a second library in James City County. And I think, we have an award-winning library system. I'm really reluctant to try to do anything adverse to that. I think that's one of the prime examples of really good regional cooperation. And James City County people are the ones who benefit the most from it. So, I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as we go forward.
Can you answer us also about basic questions like trash and recycling? Is that your?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's one of my pet peeves here. We just moved from a different state, and I am astounded that we put yard waste into the trash, and I'm astounded that we put leaves into plastic bags instead of paper bags. So is there any way we can make the recycling more environmentally friendly?
Yes, we can. We would love to. The problem is that if any contaminants go into it, it all gets thrown away. It's amazing how much recycling gets trashed because something gets put in there, and then, okay, now it's contaminated the whole thing. So a lot of people I don't think they're doing it on purpose, but a pizza box with pizza crust and everything on it can contaminate the whole thing. So now they take that and throw it away. So as we looked into it deeper and deeper, we're like, wait a minute, how's that? And so we found out more and more how much that people think are being recycled, to be honest with you, that they think is going through the recycling, they're going to do this, do that, don't really get recycled. And because a contaminant got in there somewhere, and now the recycling is going to the trash. So we started one thing with Owens, Illinois, what we used to do back in, the 70s, I believe, early 80s. And now they're collecting bottles that go directly to them. And they utilize those bottles and recycle them in their plant because they've got a glass melting down and that sort of thing. So now we got different centers where it takes just their bottle, the stuff that they can use and take there. We're looking at other recycling, and we've had a real big push because the tighter communities want recycling. The communities up where I'm at, Lennox and all that, they're kind of used to going to the dump. And they like going to dumps, like a Saturday time. We're going to the dump. And I'm like, oh, good, can you take my stuff? Because I don't like going to the dump. And I used to live on Jolly Pine right near the dump. And, but it's funny that, trying to convince, okay, do we do something within the PSA? And we're looking, we just hired a new person for trash recycling, which is a good thing because we had a hard time finding somebody just to lead that. The general services had enough that they couldn't redo an entire new program. So we looked at that. I think recycling is important. I think we should look at that. I think one day we're going to go back and go into our landfills and open them up and recycle what's there because it doesn't go anywhere. That pile of trash just sits, right? And if you look down the interstate at Newport News, that one site, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm like, well, that's gonna be bigger than Mount Trashmore. And, you know, we used to have the dump on Jolly Pond where we buried everything. Now we gotta maintain that and take care of that. And, but I think recycling is a key component. And it may end up being something that we're gonna have to almost go, okay, if you live within the PSA, we have to recycle, because we looked at different ways. Okay, can certain people buy certain products? You can have trash pickup and recycling, and if you wanna add yard waste, you can add that and all that. I think it's gonna come down to a thing where we're gonna have to decide, we're gonna have trash pickup, recycling, and any debris, and pick that up. I think it works good. York County does that, and we're looking at that as well to try to, you know, what are the other areas doing? What are they trying to do? And it's another thing with, as we grow up, you would think we're there now, but as we grow up in the community, you know, we start learning more of, hey, these are people that are coming in like y'all are. This is what we did. This is what worked for us. And that's why I say Forest County is a great avenue for people that I've been here, and I've been there, I've traveled around the world, and these are the things. This didn't work. Oh, don't y'all even try that. But this worked really nice. And this is how they did it. Or I can call back to the people and get you the information, contact you with someone to help us figure some of these things out. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, what we've got is a little odd. All the trash pickup is, you just contract whoever you want for trash pickup. And if you're like me, I've been through 2 or 3 different companies, because every time I get one, the price keeps getting higher and higher and higher, and I'll find somebody else who, you know. But the recycling has always been done through the municipal SSA. We have a contract that we do the recycling. What happened the last time around was that recycling contract became really difficult because China quit accepting a lot of our recycling materials that we were sending over there. A lot of it had to do, as he mentions, with contamination. So if you take a look now, what you can really put into your recycling bin is fairly limited. You know, paper, cardboard, you know, the metal cans. I save every piece of glass and put it in a separate thing, and I take it over to the dump so we can have the you know, sent to Owens, Illinois. That's just personal for me. But we've decided to take a look at the county. We're doing a study. We've done a study. We're sort of in the process of trying to figure out, do we want to get into providing trash pickup from the county? If you go to a lot of other places, it's done by the county. The city does a really good job. You put leaves out there, you just rake them out in the street, and they come along with the truck, suck them up. All right, you know, it's great. We've looked at options for that, and I think we are leaning toward doing something like that. And in fact, if we did that, we would be able to probably do your trash pickup, which includes the recycling and the bulk pickup, the leaves and the yard waste and everything, a lot cheaper for you. But then it would be sort of, okay, now it's mandatory that counties can do this. How we do that, whether we do it in-house or whether we do it through contract, that's all things that we're having to study. But those are things that we are looking at trying to make that determination as we go forward.
And we'll save a lot on road mileage, all the different treatments, the number of trucks you got out there, the amount of trucks and travel and our road surfaces and all that, because it cuts that way down.
Okay. All right, we have time for one more question.
And we'll hang around for any individual ones afterwards.
Hi there. Yeah, the question isn't about contamination of recycled matter, bottles and cans. The question is, what can we do about our yard waste? We lived in Seattle in King County. Everybody had a green 96-gallon trash can that we would put our yard waste in, grass clippings, tree branches, all that sort of thing. Outside of town, there was a privately held company called Cedar Grove. It would all go to their compost yard. They had a huge facility there, the big front loaders and all kinds of heavy equipment. And they would take this stuff, build enormous piles of it, let it ferment, keep moving the piles, turning them over. And then they would sell this beautiful compost back to citizens. You could pick it up in a truck by the truckload. All the local hardware stores had 1.5 or 2 cubic foot bags for sale. It was inexpensive. It was had almost no weed content, and it was a great way to dispose of the organic matter. That's what we need. You know, it's not so much a worry about getting glass and plastic and stuff like that mixed up. It's a whole separate product, and there's money to be made. Cedar Grove made a lot of money.
I think that would be something that we are going to definitely look at. I think one of the biggest problems we have right now is, you have a storm, and storm debris pickup. It's a problem for people. We don't, I have to believe you can contract with it for so much, for $50, whether they come pick up stuff. But the process we're looking at would be basically include that function, if you would, or yard debris pickup, storm damage, leaves, whatever, that we could then do something like you're talking about. But we're still in the planning stage for a lot of that, and that's good ideas, and I really appreciate the input.
And I would ask everybody that's interested in that, when you see it come up on our website, please attend the meetings, because we can use your advice and your leadership in helping us develop a good plan for the rest of the county. I thank you for that.
So much of the green waste out of the normal waste stream.
Yeah, it would.
Enormous amount of material. Jim, Michael, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.